Intellectual dishonesty.
How about intellectual laziness?
This is the phrase that's been on my mind since reading the recent profile of Blaire White on Playboy.com.
I bet you only read it for the articles. Wink, wink.
To be clear, Playboy does tend to have good articles.
Well then.
My partner Heather has written for them and contributed to their coverage of the Pulse attack last year.
One of the biggest porn merchants, with Heather's help, is contributing to the white cishet male patriarchy that contributes to the enslavement and degradation of women. I don't actually believe that, but it is, regardless of what studies reveal, a persistent opinion within the feminist community. This might sound like flippant talk, but the studies that show porn as having positive influence for some flies in the face of what some feminists think and act upon. These institutional studies versus ingrained opinion will become important later in this video response.
But this article by Deborah So is one of the most uncritical and misguided puff pieces I've ever read, particularly when Blaire White is allowed to preach at length on principles of intellectual honesty. Quote, "The absolute best thing a person can do to combat intellectual dishonesty is to remain strongly principled and stick to fact-based argumentation. Call out falsities where you see them from both your ideological opponents and like-minded people. I strongly oppose the political tribalism that has taken over this country and caused people to behave like they're on a team rather than truth-seeking individualists." Nowhere does this article make note of Blaire White's continued denial and mischaracterization of transgender medicine and healthcare.
It's possible that what you wanted in the article wasn't the actual focus of the same article. Life is like that. In one hand is what you want, and in the other is a steaming pile of poo. Get over it.
Something I've covered in extensive detail. In light of this, her supposed dedication to truth-seeking and fact-based argumentation is absolute nonsense. She has spent months openly rejecting the medical consensus supporting gender-affirming therapy and the use of puberty blockers for transgender youth.
Regardless of how you perceive the Playboy fluff piece, Zinnia Jones naively confuses Blaire White's YouTube opinion channel with an accredited pediatric academic institution. It stems from massive butthurt over Blaire's comments obscuring Zinnia's ability to distinguish one from the other. Zinnia Jones is comparing apples to oranges. There is news and scientific or medical disciplines, and there are opinions. Every person is allowed to have a set of opinions. Knowing the difference between the two is crucial to a person's cognitive ability. Here is a brief clip of opinion from Blaire White. Sounds like Blaire's opinion to me. Does anyone disagree? Write in the comments section below if you do.
So the reason I'm actually bringing this up today is because I've been pretty upset. There's a new cover of the National Geographic, which I will put right here. So it's called Gender Revolution, and on the cover is a transgender child. Quoted, "The best thing about being a girl is now I don't have to pretend to be a boy." So I actually did some research on this kid's background and their family, and what I found is really, really upsetting, really disturbing, and I'm going to come back to that. But first, I'm going to reiterate my general position on children transitioning. So I don't believe in allowing children to undergo medical gender transition. But I have debated this topic for a very long time, long before I started my channel. And every single argument that I've ever seen in support of children transitioning is built upon the premise that the child knows infallibly that they are transgender. I mean, I think most sane people would agree with me that it's absolutely crazy to take a child's word as the infallible truth that they are transgender and then using that as a valid reason to enable them to enact permanent bodily changes upon themselves, sterilize themselves, and make decisions about the entirety of their life at an age where they can't even drink. They can't drive, they can't vote, they can't legally consent to sex, but you think they can change their sex? Bye.
She claims to have expertise on this topic, even as her position contradicts the stances of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American College of Osteopathic Pediatricians, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the American Academy of Family Physicians, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Endocrine Society, and the World Professional Association for Transgender Health.
Wow, that's an impressive list of associations. But instead of relying solely on groups of studies rather than having a conversation is missing the point. Christina R. Olson does talk of these serious issues of what children do or don't permanently do to their bodies when she talks of prepubescent transgender children, what we do and do not know in this podcast.
But I think this idea that has been popular that, these are kids who we could have called transgender, and it turns out most of them aren't transgender later, I would just refine that to say, actually, most of these kids weren't transgender. If you went back and interviewed them, they weren't saying, I am a girl, I am a boy if they're a natal girl. They're saying, like, I like things that, people don't expect boys or girls to like, or they maybe have an identity somewhere between male and female. And so what we have to do, I think, is continue to do studies where we can look at how predictable is this one factor, just simply asking kids consistently, are you a boy or a girl? How systematically will that predict later life development? And I think one of my main take-homes was that's where I think we are right now. We need more research. We have suggestive research, but I think the one refinement I'd make of past conclusions is just that I don't think the data to date show that most kids who meet, say, a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, it's true most of them will not be transgender, but I would also argue that most of them never were transgender to begin with.
Dr. Olson correctly points out that the majority of children move out of this phase in their lives. She interprets the data, possibly correctly, that some youths were being misdiagnosed or misunderstood from the beginning, and rightly states that far more study is needed on the subject, rather than being the open and shut case, comparable to George Bush's lies leading the U.S. into war in Iraq, is still a big question mark. What is troubling is there are parents who, I believe, have some warped social justice warrior agenda and attempt to shape their children into the gender or sex they themselves wish them to be. Hopefully this is a rare occurrence, but a misguided parents with a motive is not a healthy recipe for the success of their children. There are disturbing examples of this mentality that can be found on YouTube. Watch.
Talking about transgender issues among adults is one thing, but what happens when a child is trans? There have been plenty of stories in the media about children as young as 3 years old coming out as transgender, but most of the media is really bad at covering stories like these. They tend to sensationalize things to make them seem more extreme than they actually are. Because of that, I think a lot of people have some deeply ingrained misconceptions about what it means for kids to come out as trans.
Today, we are talking about the fourth letter, T. T stands for trans or transgender.
Ooh, that's a cool new word.
They tell parents that their baby is a boy or a girl. That's called a gender assignment, when doctors announce that babies are boys and girls.
But now I'm confused. When we talked about gender, we said that there aren't just boys and girls.
You have a really great memory, Teddy. You're right. There's something a bit weird about how doctors assign gender to babies. That's because there aren't only boys and girls. And because not all people identify with their assigned gender.
Oh, so the doctors are wrong sometimes?
Yes, Teddy. Sometimes doctors don't assign the right genders. When a person does not identify with the gender they're assigned when they're born, they are trans or transgender. People who are trans can be boys or girls or people too.
And I can always ask someone their pronoun, just like you taught me.
There are many times you are required to listen to a 3-year-old when they speak of themselves. Are they feeling sick or hungry? As responsible parents, it is your duty to hear what they are saying, but more importantly, to make decisions about their well-being and future based on what you observe and what your experience and level of competency is. You must consult with physicians when their illness is beyond your ability to help. What does a toddler understand about complex sex and gender issues that could impact the rest of their lives? Children are deeply impressionable, and if they think they are making mommy and daddy SJW happy, they might just sing the right tune. Or maybe not. This ties directly into the topic known as Transgenders. The White Rose discusses why she is troubled by what she perceives as a trendy topic rather than a serious life decision.
The main reason I made the video was to express that I don't like how transgenderism is being normalized, but perhaps glamorized is a better word to use. It's being made cool or trendy, if you will. And a lot of people really didn't see where I was coming from, because this is not something you'd really know about unless you've entered the feminist sphere online or you watch YouTube makeup tutorials. Now, online exist many trans YouTubers or trans Instagram famous people that get thousands of likes, comments and so much attention from young girls. And it seems fishy to me because their platforms are very much focused on the fact that they are transgender. They constantly talk about their transition and whatnot. And I've spoke to quite a few trans women who have told me that these sort of people make them doubt whether they are genuinely trans. Gender dysphoria and transitioning isn't a very glamorous procedure for most people, and it's not something most people would want to broadcast to the whole world. Trans women pre-transition who suffer from gender dysphoria pretty much want to be living their lives as women. They want to be seen as women and treated as women, right? So these Transgenders, so they're called, use their transition to gain attention and an internet following. They focus so much on the fact that they are trans to the point where that becomes their whole identity. Women's spaces, including homeless shelters, washrooms and changing rooms, exist to offer women protection from men. It isn't men who fear that women might enter their locker rooms and flash, harass, assault, abuse or photograph them. This reality is often left unaddressed in conversations around gender identity. Gender self-declaration is extremely dangerous. There are no set standards as to what makes someone trans. All that is required nowadays is that a man claims he feels like a girl on the inside. What does that even mean anyway? What does feeling like a woman mean? What makes somebody a woman? These are questions that are not addressed by feminists and the left.
Rather than acknowledging the overwhelming clinical evidence in favor of an affirming approach, she labels this child abuse. She broadcasts this shameless denialism to hundreds of thousands of viewers, deliberately propagating misconceptions and causing untold damage to the public's understanding of trans people.
So if you disagree with someone's views, then they must be doing untold damage to the public's understanding. Never mind that you must be the ultimate expert and nothing you think or say could ever be wrong.
On its own, this already demonstrates a remarkable degree of intellectual dishonesty. But when I presented her with evidence contradicting her assertions, she proved just how persistent she is in her rejection of facts that don't fit her ideology. After 3,500 words and 23 citations outlining this evidence, here's how Blaire White chose to respond.
First up, we have Zinnia Jones, a transgender YouTuber who takes issue with my opinion that children should not be transitioning. What's up, Zinnia?
This is absolutely mind-numbing.
You know that I'm pretty vocal about being against children transitioning.
What is wrong with you? Like, actually, what is your problem?
Children transitioning. I thought that was obvious from when I said all about being against children transitioning.
What makes a person act like this?
Having a basic level of empathy for children and understanding that they don't have the foresight to make permanent bodily changes and sterilize themselves. That's kind of my whole thing.
Blaire makes a pretty good point at the end there. You don't agree with it because you must be the paragon of perfection who sends 3,000 words to someone. And that automatically makes you correct. Zinnia Jones lives in this bubble that is very similar to the religious right. They have monumental claims and they can quote thousands of passages from the Bible. So why are you living your life in sin? Don't you get it? You're wrong because they have thousands of words they can send you. How does that sound?
What is this?
Tourette's syndrome?
You need to understand something. Your viewers aren't there for you. They're just in it for the ready-made excuses for transphobia that you provide to them.
Okay, this might blow your mind, Zinnia, but people who are transphobic do not subscribe to trans people on YouTube. Similarly, people who are snaggletooth phobic don't subscribe to you.
I don't know why you think this is okay. I don't know why anyone thinks this is okay. It's nothing but evil, for the sake of evil.
Okay, out of all the people that I've responded to on YouTube since I started, however diametrically opposed I may have been to their views or the things that they said, I've never thought any of them were evil. I didn't even think the transgender terrorist was evil. I mean, I'm sure he's great fun at parties and satanic rituals. So I'm really sorry, Zinnia, that you seem unable to escape this pubescent mindset that the planet is separated into good guys versus bad guys, and whichever side you land on is the good guys, but it is possible to not hate trans people and simultaneously believe that children sterilizing themselves for the sake of growing tits isn't the best idea. Next.
So I'm not on board with Blaire's shot at your appearance, but she does have a point about this simplistic notion of good versus evil. There is not just good and evil. You have to be somewhere on the good and evil spectrum. That's funny. This absolutist world the SJWs live in, this black and white binary of us versus them, good versus evil, harkens back to the days when so many people did not have the same rights as we enjoy today in 2017. It wasn't but several decades ago that these complex gender issues were considered as psychological abnormalities or pathologies in the DSM, with long lists like the one you showed at the beginning of your video of institutions that agree with these interpretations. Should people in the civil rights movement have given up because long lists of professional organizations proved they were on the wrong side? This is what you're asking people to do now. We've come a long way, baby. And instead of insisting on setting us back to the days of the Inquisition where you are guilty as charged and compelled to prove your innocence, which rarely happened, we need to have a dialogue on these most sensitive subjects. Rather than shutting down those that you judge as being defective and subhuman, why not have serious debates? There is a gaping chasm on the divisive issue of abortion and female reproductive issues. The two sides couldn't be further apart, but we all cherish and value life, so it's a great starting point. So when people like Blaire White and the White Rose insist that they have no malice towards transgender people, or anyone for that matter, please take that as an area of mutual agreement and move on.
Did she acknowledge the clinical consensus and extensive evidence supporting the availability of transition treatment for trans youth? No. Did she admit that trans adolescents who are allowed to access puberty blockers have measurably improved health outcomes? No. Did she recognize that there are relevant aspects of a person's quality of life other than fertility? No. Did she offer any reason why her position should be considered more reliable and persuasive than that of numerous major medical organizations, dozens of leading children's hospitals, and countless specialists who have treated trans kids for years? No.
Okay, we get it. Blaire White is wrong and you are right. Why does Blaire White persist? Is it possible that someone other than you believes in what they talk about? Is it possible that you are wrong?
I'm Zinnia Jones. Thanks for watching, and make sure to click like and subscribe for more gender analysis.
But don't you dare be guilty of wrong speak as determined by the wise Zinnia Jones. Thank you for watching. Please comment below if you disagree with anything that's presented in this video. Please hit the like or subscribe to Disturbing Trend, and take a look at the Patreon page for support since we're getting so little from our demonetized videos here on YouTube. Goodbye.